Hi, here we are again talking about grain temperature monitoring and some things that you need to know. Now, last time we talked about why monitor your grain temperature. And we talked about the fact that grain, like yourself, is a living organism which, if it has a temperature, it's sick. But it's not just grain quality that we talk about or your grain spoilage. Another item that comes into play is something called shrink, which is often called the invisible thief, that you can actually do something about. Today, to talk about that issue, we're going to look at and talk about a 48-foot diameter 10-ring bin. Or rounding our numbers, we're going to talk about 50,000 bushels of corn. Now, if you are interested in knowing more about shrink and the technical, scientific aspects of it, you could visit Iowa State University's Extension program, and Charlie Herberg has an excellent talk about this subject. But in general, and for our purposes today, we're going to use some round figures. Now, grain, as you know, is sold by weight. We say that the bushel of corn is an average of 56 pounds, or we call it test weight. And that's made up of two things. One, dry matter, and two, water. Now, the dry matter, in one sense, is what it is when you harvest it out of the field. But the water content is that percentage figure. Now, let's talk about the fact that when we go to the elevator is going to give you a bid on grain, and on corn, that's going to be about at 15%, quite normal, and beans will be at 13%. Well, 50,000 bushels of corn at 15%, when you put it in the bin, is 50,000 bushels. But let's say you decide you need to cool that grain down, which you do, so you're going to run your fans. Now the question is, how long will you run your fans? If you run your fans too long, then shrink comes into play and steals from you. That 15%, when you run your fans too long, can now be 13% corn. So when you take it to the elevator, the nice elevator man is going to say, oh, I'm sorry, your grain is too dry. I'll have to dock you a little bit, or you've lost that 2%. So he happily pays you. But now, instead of having 50,000 bushels of corn, you have lost 574 bushels. And at today's price of $3.80 per bushel, that's $2,183 loss. Now, if you don't want to suffer the loss of shrink, and who does, how can you avoid it? Well, the only way you can avoid that is to know how soon you've cooled your grain down and when you should shut your fans off. So overcooling grain takes moisture out, it lowers your test rate, and that is shrink, and you're losing money. And of course, once again, the only way you can know if your grain is cool and you can turn those fans off and reduce the amount of shrink in the bin is by having temperature monitoring cables in the bin. I hope this advice helps you and helps you think a little bit about the money that you don't need to be losing, but you could. Thank you.